largest, and thankfully very uncommon, bear, Drew could usually recognize their presence readily, be it from the reaction of the other animals or the tracks and signs they left behind. But today's feeling vexed him. Something was out there, watching them, stalking them, but it was unfamiliar. He knew it sounded crazy, but he could pick up the scent of a predator when the air was clear. This had proved invaluable on many an occasion, saving several of the family's sheep and cattle. Although today was blustery, there was still the faint hint of a creature that was out of place, foreign to these parts. A large animal was out there, looking in, and it irked Drew that he couldn't figure out what it was, even less spy it. "You think it's the thing from last night?" asked Trent. That was exactly what Drew had been wondering. For the last few nights, Drew's shepherd watch had been unusual. The sheep had not been themselves, and all the while Drew had been consumed by an awful sense of foreboding. Ordinarily, the sheep would be very receptive to his commands and calls, but bit by bit, they had become more erratic. This had coincided with the waxing of the moon, which often spooked the animals, and it even caused Drew to grow ill with worry. It wasn't a pleasant sensation, the feeling of being stalked by a predator in your own backyard. Towards the end of last night's watch, he'd gathered and penned the majority of the flock, and picked up the stragglers that had wandered further afield. Only one had remained, the ram, naturally, and it had managed to find its way up onto the bluffs that towered over the coast below. The Ferren farm was situated on a rocky promontory of land that reached out from the cold coast into the White Sea, cut off on almost every side by the rock walls that surrounded it. He'd found the ram in a state of panic. It had bucked and started, panicking and throwing its head back in fear. Drew raised his hands, which should have calmed it down, but it had the opposite effect. Shaking its head from side to side, mouth open and gulping at the salty air, the ram had backed up a step, then another. Pebbles had tumbled over the cliff edge, dislodged by frantic hooves as it struggled for purchase. One moment it was there, an eye fixed on him in stricken terror. The next it was gone, disappearing off the cliff. Drew had scrambled the remaining distance to the edge, white-knuckled fingers clutching the earth as he peered over. 100 feet below, heaped in a broken mass, the sheep lay unmoving, its life dashed away on the sharp rocks. As the moon shone down, Drew had looked about, convinced he wasn't alone, sure beyond reason that whatever had startled the animal was still nearby. He'd raced home through the sickly moonlight, heart thundering, not stopping until he'd hit the farm's front door with an almighty crash. Now, on this stormy morning, Drew had the same familiar feeling. He'd be keeping the sheep penned in tonight, close to the farm, where he could keep an eye on them. "Drew!" His father pointed in the direction of the remaining sacks that were lined up outside the heavy timber doors of the barn. "Get a move on! I want to get to Tuckborough while there's still daylight, lad!" Drew trudged to the barn, speeding up when he caught sight of his father's glower. His mother, Tilly, stood on the doorstep of the farmhouse, drying her hands on her apron. "Try not to be hard on him, Mac," she said, as her husband approached, reaching out and brushing the sweat-soaked hair from his brow. "He's probably still raw from what happened to that ram." "He's still raw," said Mac incredulously. "It's not him who has to fork out for another animal. If I don't get there before noon, the best on show will be gone to some other bidder." He saw his son dragging the last 2 sacks across the farmyard to the wagon. "If you tear those sacks, then it'll come out of your wages, lad," he shouted. Tilly had to bite her lip, mother's instinct telling her to jump in and defend the boy, but thought better of it. Mac's mood was bad enough without one of their rows darkening it further. Drew stopped to throw one of the sacks over his shoulder, looking back to his parents, who stood talking beneath the farmhouse porch. His father was pointing his way, his hooked thumb gesturing, while his mother shook her head.